I was gonna start this intro early, but that fucking car. Anyway, hey guys, it's Dom, and it's Spooktober, so today we're gonna be talking about books that spook the shit out of me. So hello. Yes, hello, hi. Because it's October and Halloween is like 2 weeks, a week and a half from now from when I'm filming this, I'm gonna talk about books that scared me. Because I have a bookshelf on Goodreads called Scared Shitless. And for these books, they're not necessarily horror. Actually, all of them are like not horror, basically. And that is because as a kid, I didn't read a lot of horror novels. Part of the reason was because I wasn't allowed to, because a lot of the like really scary ones were adult fiction, and you know, I was like 10. And then recently they just weren't grabbing my attention, so I'm really into like spooky books now. But sometimes non-horror books do scare me, like psychologically, most of the time, and because you can't like fathom some of it. So we're going to talk about those. I have about 18 books to talk about, so we're going to get started. So the first book I'm going to talk about is the OG. I read this when I was 10. This is a horror novel, and it was The Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by Alvin Schwartz. And then this is just a bunch of short stories for kids, so like if you read it now, it's not going to be scary. But it's a bunch of short stories for kids, and I remember we read this as a class, and some of the stories tell you to do certain things. Like, I know in the first story, it tells you to turn to your neighbor and scream. So we were able to do that, and it has drawings that scared the shit out of me as a kid. The drawing for The Thing, I think about when I'm in the dark, and then it scares me. And there's one of a girl who has like no eyeballs, and it just looks really weird. That scares me. Stories that did scare me was the high beams one, because that can happen in real life, so that's not really fiction. That one freaked me out. A lot of the first few freaked me out, and I mean, if you read this, there's like no reason for me to like keep ranting about it. I know this is the OG for a lot of people. I did like the last few stories because the last few stories were like on the humor side. And apparently this is going to be a Netflix original now, so that's exciting. The next book I want to talk about is not horror, and it's Escape Children of the Holocaust by Alan Zulo. This scared me in the sense that it is nonfiction, so this author took stories from real life people and told them in this book. I read this in middle school when I was first getting into history. The fact that this can happen to some people is horrifying. The Holocaust was a very horrifying time, as a lot of you know. I can't get too much into this book because the last time I read it I was like 11, 12 years old, so I don't remember much. But this was horrifying just in the sense that it's real life and it happened to children. I'm pointing as if I know where I'm going to put the book. And I'm going to move on. So the third one that scared me was Go Ask Alice by Beatrice Sparks. But it's labeled as anonymous, so I don't know where this Beatrice Sparks came from. I'm not exactly sure the story anymore, because I know when I read it, I think I was a freshman in high school. But when I first read it, the story was that it was a real-life journal of a drug addict, and then someone found it, but then they published it anonymously? Wow. After a while, the rumor was that the government wrote it. Right now I have no idea what the story is about this book, but I know when I first read it, the book was that it was just an anonymous journal of a girl. So that's why it scared me when I read it. And like, I have this huge fear of drugs. And from what I remember of this book, I don't have like a physical copy at all. It's on my Kindle. From what I remember of this book, it was just watching a girl's sanity unravel. Because she did start out as this like normal girl, I guess. Well, I hesitate to say normal, but the sane person, but then the drugs affected her so much she slowly just blah, I guess. Books and movies and TV shows, any sort of media that tells a story of someone losing their sanity just creeps me out, because this could happen in real life. I mean, I don't know anyone personally that went through what the Go Ask Alice girl went through, but you know, I've seen real life TV shows of people talking about their struggle with drugs. For a story like this, it horrifies me in the sense that it makes me sad. The next book on my list is The Devil's Arithmetic by Jane Yolen, and this is another story of the Holocaust, and that's why it scared me again. And for this one's fiction, this is not real life. It's about this girl who has to go to her Jewish family's thing, and by Jewish girl, she's like a modern time Jew, and she needs to go to a family thing that she doesn't really want to go to, and then she falls asleep, but then wakes up back in the 1940s, I think. It was either 1939 or like early 1940s, and she's in this small Jewish town in Poland, and she meets like all these people. She doesn't really understand what year she's in yet, but then suddenly the Nazis come, and then she gets sent off to a concentration camp where she meets Rivka, blah, 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 blah. So this whole story, I kind of think of it as a coming-of-age story, because I understand that the whole point of her going back in time was to teach her why the things that she has to do as a Jew are important to her and her family. Some of the things like they had to go through in this book were just sad, like really sad and scary. One part, so kind of spoilery, the one part that scared me was when the Nazis caught a little boy and they said, oh, little boys should be with their mothers, because they knew that the boy's mom was dead. So you all know where this story is going, and that's how it was told. It was a lot of things that the reader knows but the characters don't, which is understandably how a lot of Holocaust stories go. But it was instances like that, and just at the end when you find out how many people in this little town actually survived. And yeah, I know a lot of people read this book. I know a lot of people saw the movie, but the movie is so different from the book. But on that note, we're gonna move on. The next book is Living Dead Girl by Elizabeth Scott. This one was just freaky because of the topic. I know a lot of people, given the topic of this book, a lot of people gave this 1 star without even reading it, just because of what the topic is about. And this book is about pedophilia. As you can tell, I read the morbid stuff because, like, what the hell? I don't think it should be censored because, like, pedophilia is a problem that needs to be, like, talked about so people can understand how bad it actually is. What happened in this book? Her new name is Alice and she's 15 years old. When she was 10 years old, she was on a field trip and this dude came in and swiped her away and tried to turn her into this, like, little child. Like, she had to wear these little, like, prissy dresses that you wear when you're, like, 3 years old. He beat her ass when she first got her period. She's on these pills that stop her from developing breasts. She's not allowed to eat to keep her small and skinny. And he forces her to have sex with him all the time. And, like, just the fact that this is about pedophilia, that's why it creeped me out so much. There were sex scenes, but they didn't have any detail to them. Like, honestly, the most detail was, oh, Alice, do you love me? And she would have to say yes. Obviously, she didn't love him, but she had to say yes to save her life. So then he would say, show me. And then he put her head by his crotch, and then that was it. Like, that was the sex scene. So that's as much detail as it got, but it's just knowing what he was doing to her. No, I get, like, shivers just thinking about it. And I think it was a very tastefully told story. Like, you knew the author's intent was to tell you that this is bad, we need to bring light to this problem and stop this problem. So she didn't glorify it in any manner. 15-year-old Alice did not fall in love with the guy. In fact, the whole book was, so, like, the plot of this book was her trying to plan an escape from this guy. You know, you're rooting for her, you want her to get away. I mean, if you're really sensitive to this, obviously don't read it. But I think for educational purposes and to bring light to a problem, this is a, like, I don't want to say good because of the topic, but you guys know what I mean. Like, this is a book to start with. So the next one is Gothic 10 Original Dark Tales by Deborah Noyes, but she's more so the editor because each story was told by a different person. To be honest, I don't really remember much of this other than that, you know, it, like, freaked me out. I didn't really want to read it at night. I ended up unhauling this because I knew I was never going to read it again. But it's, like, good for, like, creepy stories. This is one of those books where it's fall, it is cold, the leaves are turning orange. Fun fact, our leaves are not orange yet. They are still green as of October, what day is it today? October 19th, still green. You know, the leaves are orange, they're falling down, you're curled up on your little chair with your blanket, maybe have a record player going on, and then this is the book to read. So I forgot to mention that there's another OG book for this list, and it's because of how Goodreads, like, labeled it, so that's why I didn't talk about it earlier. Because the way I'm talking about these books are the order I read them, because that's how they're listed on these lists. Goodreads just deleted my list. Coraline by Neil Gaiman, I read in 6th grade. This book, I could not read at night. For those of you who don't know what this is about, Coraline moves to this new house, and she sees a little door that she wants to go through, but it's bricked up. Can't go through it. But then one night, mice lead her to this door that you could suddenly walk through, and she goes to, like, this other world, meets her other mother, and life in this other world is better, and she wants to stay there. Oh my god. Neil Gaiman is a creepy writer. He's a hit or miss for me. I either really enjoy his books or I don't like them. I really like his children's stuff, which is what Coraline is. It's not adult fiction, it is middle grade. I was horrified to read this at night, so I would actually wake up at 6 in the morning and read it before school because I thought that was, like, the safest time to read this book. And it was just creepy because, like, the other mother was evil, and then things that would happen to her other father, and things that were just happening to the other people in this world, and she's like this 10-year-old girl trying to save the world here. Even the movie was actually, like, really creepy. It's one of those things where you don't know how to describe it, why it's creepy, but it is. And I recently reread Coraline, so that's actually why Goodreads put it so high on the list, because I recently reread it last year. It didn't scare me as much, one, because there was a reread, two, I'm a lot older now, but it was still, like, you know, like the heebie-jeebies or whatever old people like to say? I got that. Funko Pops just came out, though. So I also have the complete stories and poems by Edgar Allan Poe in here, but I can't give you, like, a specific story that creeped me out. Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. When I say scared, I don't mean this scared. I was actually really angry reading this book. It was 5 out of 5 stars. It more so creeped me out how this crime was done. This crime, I don't even know how to say it to you guys, because if you haven't read this, it would be a spoiler. So I'm not going to get into detail about why this book was freaky, but it was smart, and it makes me wonder if Gillian Flynn herself has committed a crime, because you have to be really smart to do what happened in this book. I Can See in the Dark by Karen Fossum. This was another library read. It has a really low rating on Goodreads, but I gave it 4 or 5 stars, I think. This book is from, like, the Scandinavia region, I think. I think she's Swedish. No, she's probably not. I probably just pulled that out of my ass. I don't know where she's from, but she's not an American writer. Her books do get translated into English. And this is just about a guy who's really, really sadistic, and then he works in a mental hospital. No, it's just a hospital for the elderly. He works in a hospital. He hurts his patients. He wants to hurt everyone he sees. I don't really remember too much about this book, actually, but he was what was scary about this book. House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. I have talked about this book 1,000 times. So this book is about this family that moves into this house, and they find out that it is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. There's like a room that just keeps growing, and people are dying in it, and blah, blah, blah. This investigation team comes to investigate it, because that's what investigation teams do. It was the way this book was written. Like, chapter 9 was about a labyrinth, so the whole book, or the whole chapter was one big labyrinth. The footnotes were taking you all over the place, and half the time, the footnotes were actually making you read it in a circle, and you don't realize that until like the 3rd time around. And I know it's usually once they're in the room. That's when the pages get all like freaky. They were talking about a rope expanding, so the spaces between the words would gradually expand to the point where there was either a sentence across the page, and it would expand to the point where it would turn into 10 words, then 5, and then just 1 across the page. And then the scary part was the guy telling the story. So the guy telling you the story is also a character of the book. His name was Johnny, and he comes from a very, very fucked up family. His mom was sent to the mental asylum at the time, and then you could see Johnny losing his sanity as he was writing about this book, and how he was secluding himself and just going crazy. It was a wild, wild book. You should just read it. The next book on this list is World War Z by Mac Brox. So this is about the zombie apocalypse and the aftermath of it all. So the narrator of this book, I forgot what his name was, but he was going around people and interviewing them and their stories. I think this book is a horror novel, I'm not too sure. But he was asking people what happened, and just the way these zombies were written out was really, really cool. It's a lot different than the movie. But then one interview that scared me in particular was with this girl who was mentally challenged, I think. Like, she was physically an adult, but mentally a child. That was basically what they were trying to get across with this girl. And she told a story about being in a church and how the zombies, like, came into the church and they attacked her mom. But the reason her story freaked me out is because she would actually, like, mimic the sounds. And the way the story was written, you could just hear the sounds in your head. And I had chills running up and down my spine. I had goosebumps, and no zombies. I think I'm good with the zombie apocalypse. So the next story is The Whalestow Letters by Mark Z. Danielewski. So this book is in House of Leaves, because at the end of House of Leaves, you see all these letters that Johnny's mom sent him. But the Whalestow Letters have more, so that's why I bought the book, even though I'm technically like rereading something. Whalestow is the asylum that his mom was sent to, and his mom is convinced of things that obviously aren't real. These letters, you could just see her panic and her sanity just it's not there. And it's probably the reason why Johnny went crazy reading the book. I know one letter she was convinced these people are after her, so what she did, she wrote a jumbled mess. Like, the letter made no sense, but what you had to do, you had to take the first letter of, it was either the first letter of each word or the first letter of each sentence. I think it was the first letter of each sentence, because if you took each letter, it formed what she really meant, and she was just talking about how these men were after her. And the letters went from this cohesive, well thought out, oh, I love my son kind of thing, to just her going crazy, and she's like asking Johnny to take him, and you will feel like you're losing your sanity as you're reading Johnny's mom's letters. The next book is not horror, and again, it's a true story. It's called Survival in Auschwitz by Primo Levi. Primo Levi was a Jewish Italian sent to the concentration camp, Auschwitz, and it's just his story there. I won't get into too much detail because I don't want to spoil anything. It was just really, really sad, and I think because he gave a bunch of facts at the end of the novel. And I think the fact that scared me the most was how many Jewish Italians were left. So in Italy, it's actually really, really rare for someone to be Jewish. Like, as of now, I just looked up the statistics. And as of now, 93% of Italy is Roman Catholic, and considering where the Vatican is, that should make a lot of sense. My family's Italian, we're Roman Catholic. You get it. 93% of Italy is Roman Catholic, and then like that other 7% is just mixed with all different religions. So you can see Judaism is not very popular in Italy. There's a fact at the end of the novel talking about, or maybe it was either the end of the novel or my teacher told us this, my professor. At one point there were 40,000 Italian Jews in Italy. But then Mussolini came in the 1920s, and by the time World War II started, only 30,000 were left. And that's because Mussolini either converted them to Roman Catholicism, they moved out of Italy into America, or they were killed. But by the end of World War II, there were only 700 left. That freaked all of us out, and I remember we were all crying in this lecture. So I think it's just all these facts about the novel that really scared me. Next is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This scared me for the reason that it could happen in real life, and I feel like we're heading towards that. Handmaid's Tale is about a post-apocalyptic world where each person, you're basically in a level in society. Handmaid, you're the baby maker. You're the one that the guy has sex with to get his babies. They're all women. You always need to have an accountability partner. Your name is of the man that owns you. So for our main character, she was owned by a guy named Fred, so her name was of Fred. And it was just men taking over a woman basically, and how she wants to get out of it, and she's remembering her past life. Freaked me out, and I got chills at the end of it. Don't want to get into too much detail because I know this book is getting a lot of popularity right now because of the Hulu show, so I'll stop talking about it here so then you get no spoilers. I have another OG that I didn't talk about earlier because it was a reread, so Goodreads put it up. It's Night by Elie Wiesel, which again, this scared me because it was a real life story. This is his autobiography of him in Auschwitz. And the part that scared me the most is where he talked about babies being thrown up into the air and Nazis would shoot them like targets. Some of the stuff he saw was just so gruesome, and then like what he had to do to help his father was so sad. Anything about the Holocaust should be in this playlist. Anything about the Holocaust should be in this bookshelf. One of my roommates are home, so now I have to talk quietly. That's all I have for you guys right now. Yeah, not a lot of horror on this list at all. I think maybe 3 of the books are horror books. I was trying to read some spooky books this year. I just read The Woman in Black by Susan Hill, but it wasn't scary, and that's why it's not on the list, and I'm so upset. I'm almost done with Salem's Lot by Stephen King, which is not scary, but like it's so good. And then I have a horror story lined up for after this from Page Habit. And other than that, I am done, so I will see you guys later. Ciao, tutti.